everybody, and welcome to our podcast series, Difficult Conversations, with me, Poppy Gerrard-Abbott. Today, we are talking about single parents, motherhood, and the coronavirus pandemic. And I'm very lucky to be joined by two special guests. The first is Amy Andrada, PhD researcher and teacher in sociology and single mum to 15-year-old Ethan. And also Zemar Dajani, solicitor and author, and single mum of two girls and treasurer to the North-West London Gingerbread group. So hello and welcome.
Hello.
Hello. Hi.
Would you like to expand a little bit on what I've said so far about your roles, maybe speak a little bit about your journey to motherhood and single motherhood, and anything else about your work that you would like to tell listeners?
So, yes, my name is Zemar Dajani. I'm first a single mom to two girls. One is 25 years old and the other one is 13 years old. I've been divorced twice. So the first time was when my first daughter was a year old, and the second time was almost 5 years ago. I was divorced in different countries, so I have, different experiences from each one. They were, lots of heartaches and challenges in both divorces. But because of these challenges and experiences, I actually started writing a book. As actually the guidebook on divorce, mostly giving other moms basically, or thinking of getting divorced or thinking of separating, giving them lessons from what I learned from my experience, and also speaking to other moms who are thinking of separating or thinking of divorcing, and getting some tips from their experiences as well. So it's more of like a self-help guidebook to help everyone navigate the very, very tricky and emotional roller coaster of separation and divorce. I'm also a solicitor, so I'm a freelance solicitor. I specialize in commercial contracts. So that's kept me very busy and very. It's giving me some financial stability. And being a freelance solicitor means that I can work around my daughter's schedule as a single mom. So I don't have to work long hours, which I used to work when I used to work for different law firms. So I like the flexibility and of working whenever I want to, and actually also earning money from home, which is great. And also being part of the Gingerbread group has actually been a really huge blessing for me. I've met a lot of single moms and actually some single dads too in that group. Single parent by choice, and some are by default. And it's also always very good to connect with like-minded people. We meet regularly, either socially, or we try to give each other some guidelines and guidance whenever we can as a group. And I'm the treasurer for that group, so we try to raise funds to finance the social gatherings and to help the members as much as we can. So I think that's a bit about me.
Oh, great. That's awesome. I don't have anything remotely similar to that. That it is. It's absolutely literally. I wish I had those types of resources when I first became a single parent. So my name's Amy Andrada. I'm a PhD researcher with the University of Edinburgh. I study deviance and gender and family, and my PhD is specifically focused on motherhood. And I've examined, researched marriage and family and stuff like that for the last 10 years or so. So my more or less background is kind of wondering, as from a deviant perspective, what it looks like when, as a sociologist, when people aren't moving in certain traditional fashions, and what they experience as single parents, and what are the trajectories towards that and away from it, and how inconsistent that status is. So I look at that for relationship status and what that means for women, and what happens when we deviate from that, and what we do within the family, and how we manage the family, maintain it, and how we're kind of these invisible characters at all points when it comes to that system. So I look at it obviously from a very academic perspective, but as a researcher engaging and talking to many single women and single mothers in particular, their stories are quite versed and versatile. So there's never really this notion of the traditional single mother. They all come from remarkably different backgrounds, and most mothers don't anticipate being single. And that's kind of a stigma that we associate with single mothers, and it's something that they internalize. So I look at kind of the spectrum of what that means and how we treat the group and how the group responds because of that type of treatment. So again, very sociological. I am the mother of a 15-year-old son. I've been a consistent single mother, although my relationship status has changed over the last 15 years, but my single parenthood has not changed. I've always made a distinction between those two fractions. And that's just a personal choice that I made. That's me in a nutshell.
Thank you so much for both of you sharing your personal journeys and stories around single motherhood. And we will obviously go into that in more detail. Just to specify to our listeners, I would like to say a bit about Gingerbread. So I used to work for Gingerbread. I oversaw the support and friendship groups at the charity, and Gingerbread is the national charity for single parent families, just to make that clear to our listeners. So this podcast is focused on covering difficult and less represented topics in the social and political sciences and in feminism. So topics such as motherhood, sex work, and radical politics. And as the podcast has been born during the coronavirus pandemic, the focus at the moment is on the particularly less represented and sociological perspectives on the virus. So today we're going to be discussing the role of mothers and the relationship between motherhood and the coronavirus as we continue in this podcast series, a conversation about how the virus is highlighting the inequalities that we have in our society. So my first question to both of you is, what is the role of mothers in fighting the coronavirus? Would you say they are at the forefront of battling the virus?
I do believe that we are at the very forefront of this role. Single mothers in general always have been wearing so many different hats, because most single moms, have to be the carer and the cook and the driver and the nurse and the teacher, and for those who work also, the bank for their kids, even before the coronavirus. So having the coronavirus epidemic probably makes the fathers realize more of the the different roles that the mothers take part in. I come from a different. My personal experience is different probably from most people, because my ex-husbands live in a different country. So the coronavirus hasn't changed much my role per se, because I've always done whatever I did, in this country without their involvement as per se. However, the actual effects of the coronavirus on my daughter, my 13-year-old daughter, was very, very, very dramatic. So basically, her father lives in Egypt, and they usually spend every Easter together, whether it's in Egypt or in any other holiday destination. But since we are now facing the coronavirus and we're in lockdown, she's not able to travel to Egypt. She's not able to see her father. The last time she saw him was in December over Christmas break. And her birthday is in April. So it was a tradition for them to always celebrate her birthday with her dad, wherever they may be. So for her not seeing her dad for so long, it was a huge heartache and huge, for her it was like a huge disaster. Like, how can I survive without seeing my dad for so long? Especially that her birthday is coming up, and for her, birthday means spending time with daddy. So obviously it's nothing to do with me. It's not, it's not like I had any part in this virus, but deep down, because we are living in different countries, and it was my decision to move to England. This may have, there may be some resentment, instilled in her because we are in different countries. Had we been in the same country, at least she would have been able to see her father on a more regular basis. So it's very difficult. I try to comfort her as much as I can, and she speaks to her dad regularly. Not every day, but maybe every few days, especially in the weekends. But obviously that's no replacement for actually being with him and in flesh and being together for a few weeks, which was what they're used to experiencing during the holidays. So yeah, that was the main negative consequence of the virus on my daughter. So just being away from her father, and also we don't know how long it's going to last. Some people say it's going to be a few weeks, some people say it could be a few months. So the uncertainty of how long this epidemic is going to last for is also another added worry for her, and obviously for her father, because they're both restrained by something that's outside of their control, and I can imagine how hard it must be on both of them, because they both live to see each other in her school holidays. So I sympathize with both of them, and I'm trying to help my daughter cope with that as much as I can. Finally, being away from her friends as well is another problem, because she's a very social butterfly, and she loves chatting with her friends on a regular basis. And even though they chat now on phone and social media, it's not the same as when they're together, again, face to face. So having to do their lessons virtually online, and actually today she had a test online. So, it's all a new experience for her. But again, not knowing how long it is going to last for.
That sounds like a very stressful situation for both of you.
Yes, it is. Whenever you're whenever you're a single parent, especially when both parents live in different countries, it's a very, very delicate matter when it comes to the kids, because especially if they have good relationships with both parents, and having to try to satisfy both parents' needs, wants, expectations is very tricky, especially if even if they're living in the same country. So how is it when they're living in different countries? So that's something that I'm trying to discuss in my book, because divorce is it can happen anytime, anywhere, and sometimes the parents have to, think of alternative solutions to try to make things easier on their kids. So, for instance, in my case, it was, when we were discussing our divorce settlement, I always made it clear that no matter where me and my daughter live, that she will always have constant connection with her dad. They can see each other whenever they can, and during all her school holidays, she can be with him. So, trying to make it as easy as possible on both of them, because I believe that every parent needs to keep a constant connection and relationship with their kids, no matter where they are, and no matter how bad the divorce was or the separation was. It's nothing to do with the kids. It's always the kids' best interest has always to be the number one in any in any separation or any divorce.
Yeah. The reality of a lot of single mothers is that they do obviously the bulk, if not all of the work on their own. And they try to keep a positive relationship with ex-partners who are the fathers of their children, obviously. And that's always a constant battle. So I think the kind of the theme that comes out from that is what I'm doing with my son is maintaining consistency and normalcy as much as possible, even though there's obviously been a transition, and trying to smooth out that transition as much as possible. And as far as our roles, this is kind of a parent role, but to be frank, I actually think it's more weighted towards women because we're expected to kind of always grease all the wheels all the time. And I think that's what's always unseen about our labor and our work and our roles. We just take on so many multiple roles that they become part of mother. So caregiver, teacher, nurse, cook, therapist, we're all these things in one, worker. And it's because we do all of them all the time that it's kind of taken for granted, like, oh yeah, mom will do it. And our role, I think, and something that's often, I think, missing is the language of us. As I was listening to her responses, I didn't hear any discussion on where she was in the matter. It was about a focus on her children, which is normally the focus of mothers. And what we tell mothers to do is always focus on other people. But I'm always thinking, well, where are you in the mix? And where, to maintain consistency, you have to have something for yourself. So that's kind of my focus as well. Like, how do I, to be quite frank, our lives haven't really changed. I have a really insulated life, largely because I'm strapped for time and energy and money all the time. So I'm working. If I'm not working, I'm with my son. If I'm not working with something with my son, I'm asleep. So the idea of not having a community is really common for me. And the only real shift is that my son's doing schoolwork, doing home. Like that's the only real shift. And I'm a teacher, so I'm teaching him. And I'm spending more of my hours teaching him than I normally would, but that's not really changed. So we have consistency, and my focus is to maintain as much normalcy as possible. So making sure he gets up, making sure he has a schedule, making sure he does his work, making sure he doesn't think this is an extended vacation. It's not, because we don't know how long this is going to last. And my responsibility, like I think a lot of other mothers' responsibility that we take on, is how do we create some form of normalcy in the middle of the chaos so that our families are functioning, so that we are the backbone, so that we're maintaining all this. And again, we disappear in the process of that, of course. So those are the themes I'm hearing, and those are the themes in my life, and I think are going to be really consistent for mothers, particularly single mothers. Is it kind of the greasing of the wheel? How do we maintain normalcy? How do we lower the chaos? And how do we be kind of this constant figure that is always there and present and strong, and that we don't really consider needing anything because women are so, quote, selfless. So that's really what I see is anyone who's witnessing what we're doing. If you're in the home with us, you're witnessing how we're greasing the wheel all the time, and that there is no room for us in that picture, and that everything we do is a sacrifice, and it's all the invisible aspects of it are just kind of being magnified now.
Thank you, Amy. That was a fantastic summary around how the workloads of the pandemic, and particularly within the home in this self-isolation period, are heavily gendered. So one of my biggest learnings when I was working at Gingerbread was that over 90% of single parents are women, which I wasn't surprised to hear. But something that I found very hard-hitting was that half of single parent families are living in poverty. And both of these statistics are really coming under the microscope because of the ways that the pandemic is shedding light on the inequalities, the economic and social and domestic inequalities around the world. So moving on to our next question, what specific challenges do you think single parents face during this pandemic? So you've already listed a few, but I'm interested in how it impacts your stress levels and how it specifically adds to your workloads. Or have you not really seen a lot change because you're so used to juggling such a tremendous and immeasurable workload?
I think more or less the same, just a little bit slightly weighted. So it's magnified that I have to be a therapist, which I already am, but it's magnified that I have to, manage my son as he's working his way through, not seeing his friends, although he can see them online, taking on more hours to do his work with him. Not that I didn't do that, but there's more hours now required. And making an added effort to create normalcy. So I force him to go for a walk with me once a day, or I encourage him to do, a workout in the front room so that he gets some physical exercise. So, I think those are the things that it's kind of hitting home, is that I have to work harder to create normalcy because I don't have other systems in place outside the home that will encourage him to do his schoolwork or that will encourage him to exercise. It's all been now driven into the home. So now I have to take on those roles even more than I did before. So beyond the weight of taking on, I think, more of a role or more responsibility in the roles I was already taking, that's really what I've seen is now I have to create and maintain all the systems within the home. So I think there's the added pressure when it comes to that. But everything else for us is relatively the same. We don't really have a community because single moms don't largely have communities. They're too busy working and trying to feed their kids and manage their children. So that's not really different for me. Talking to people online and my son talking to people online and having that's not really different beyond the fact he's not really seeing his friends. Those are the only times I get to connect with people is when I talk to people online, because that's the half an hour I take for myself to talk to somebody about something that's usually directed towards my work. So, I mean, as far as our lives, for the most part, it's just bringing those systems in and learning how to manage them together now. But beyond that, most of it's relatively the same. Like we're isolated, we're insulated, we rely on ourselves. We already know the systems don't work for us, so we utilize them in different ways as it is. So this isn't, it's a mixed answer, but for the most part, it's just more weighted than it was before, but slightly more, not really overwhelming though.
Yeah. So would it be fair to say that the stress levels and the high workload and the isolation that you experience is normalized to the extent that the pandemic isn't a huge shock to you?
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's not like if anything, I had a hard time understanding what other people's problems were. I'm like, oh, so you're isolated? Welcome to the club. I mean, it sounds really like dismissive, but that's the reality I think a lot of women in my position are in. So you have to work on your own. You don't get to go out and have coffee. You don't get to go out and have friends. Okay, I'm sorry. You have a Skype coffee date. That's what I do. Like that. But that's my life. I've transitioned into that life, and that's the reality of my life. So I've accepted it. And I have to, if I want to make sure my son's maintained, if I want a career, if I want to make sure we're not on welfare, which we were at one point. So yeah, it's just, no, nothing's really changed. Always constantly moving, never having time for yourself, not interacting with people, not really having friends, not really having intimate conversations or intimate people around you. That's the consistent reality, I think, of a lot of single parents. And there's research on that we call intimacy deficiency. And that's really the kind of, as equipped as single parents and single mothers are, that's kind of the issue, their crux that they always deal with, is that they're moving between systems and doing things all the time, and that they're overloaded and stressed, that they never make time for themselves, and that there's no room to, there's no time to. So it's not even like it's not even an option in their peripheral. So yeah, it just has more or less informed me that other people are now engaging with the limitations that we already engage with.
That's fascinating, the concept of intimacy deficiency, which would also add further layers of stress containment for single parents. Absolutely. Thank you, Amy.
I wanted to add that my daughter's school, I actually called the school principal on Monday, which was way before the government even hinted that it's going to lockdown. And I said, listen, I don't feel comfortable sending my daughter to school. I don't want to risk sending her to school and getting the virus. So I would much prefer her to stay home, and she can try to catch up, through online learning or by connecting with her teachers. And at that time, the principal was very understanding, and he's like, okay, fine. Obviously, I cannot force you to send your daughter to school when you don't feel comfortable. We're going through a very unprecedented times right now. We don't know what's going to happen and when or if we're going to have a lockdown. But basically, it's your decision and your choice, which I took full responsibility for. And I said, listen, this is my choice and this is what I decided to do. So for her, she started isolation a week before her peers. So in a way, she felt like when lockdown actually happened, she had this 1 week head start from her friends. So it was a little bit easier for her when the lockdown happened from Friday onwards, because she was already at home for a week. Obviously, that 1 week was really, really difficult, especially that all her friends were going to school. They were sharing with her, what she missed out on, and so it was a very, very difficult time for both of us, because it was like we were pioneering, we were the pioneers in her school, because no one else in her class, apart from one other person, decided to self-isolate before it became, a government order. And I think she appreciates that later on, that, okay, I understand where you came from, Mommy. I know that, because she was against it. She wanted to go to school. And I said, no, I'm not going to school. I put my foot down, and she was completely against it at the beginning. She was like, she wasn't thinking about any health risk, but she was thinking about all the, she's going to miss out on her PE. She was supposed to be doing a netball match, which obviously got cancelled anyway. She takes part in a theater group, which obviously also got cancelled. So all the things that she thought she was going to be missing out on actually got cancelled anyway. So, there's this fear of missing out syndrome that she didn't want to miss anything, but ultimately they got cancelled, for obvious reasons. But obviously I had to I had to bear a lot of the grunt from her in the beginning. She thought I was being overprotective, and why are other parents sending their kids to school, and I'm being very strict with her and going against the norm. But I think in hindsight, I think she appreciates where I was coming from. Also, my parents are in their late 70s, and for me that was my biggest my biggest concern. I don't want to risk hurting my parents in any way. I don't want them to catch the virus. They both have underlying conditions, so that was, for me, that was a forefront reason for me keeping my daughter at home.
Absolutely. I think I'm very interested in what relationships single parents will have with their fear of sickness and death during the coronavirus, because caring capacity is more limited and restricted within single parent families. Has that been anything that has crossed your mind? It's just, sorry if that's a serious and hard-hitting question, but you do think about, what would you do if somebody fell seriously sick, or if somebody died? And if caring capacity is more limited within a family structure, then those decisions are even more complicated.
Exactly, especially if the other parent is living in different countries. So it's not like he could just fly in whenever he wants to. It's a very difficult issue to think about, but it could be reality, because this epidemic is affecting everyone from all walks of life. Even the Prime Minister got affected. So it's not just the old people who are at risk. It's anyone. A lot of children who are getting the virus, and from all walks of life. So I know at the beginning of the epidemic, people were saying, just keep the old people at home because they're more at risk. But now we know that actually there's a lot of young people who died from this. So it's a huge unknown disease that we're still trying to understand and find a cure for. And I don't know how long it's going to take before that happens. But in the meantime, we need to do whatever it takes to safeguard our health and our children's health, and obviously all our loved ones. Because if anyone gets it from your family, then it's almost like a ripple effect that you don't know how serious it will affect the others. So A lot of times people have and they don't even know they have it. So that's a worry, because just because you seem healthy, it doesn't mean that you're not carrying the virus.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I've that for me, that's been heightened. Not just the notion of the virus, but the lack of access to medical care and other issues that come with that, right? So, like, Ethan just broke something this morning by accident, and I told him, I go, vacuum that up. He's like, no, I picked it up. I go, no, vacuum it up, because we don't have time, energy, and there's no resources. If you get cut and I have to take you to the hospital, like, they're not going to admit you anytime soon. So no, please vacuum that. Like, and I know this sounds really trivial, but that's what I'm thinking. Like, I had an infection last week, some hangnail, and thank God I had like antibiotics. But I'm thinking that's where I'm thinking of. It's like, no, we don't. There aren't services available right now. They're really limited. That's where I'm coming from. Not just the virus; it's other things.
Yeah, I have a lot of friends who are actually working in the NHS. I have some doctor friends, I have some nurse friends, and they're telling me like how desperate the situation is. I mean, even to the point that some doctors and nurses don't have the protective gear to wear, like the gloves and the mask. I mean, how bad is that? I mean, if the people are supposed to help keep us alive are not protected, then what about the patients? I mean, it's a desperate situation, and we need to take this really seriously.
Absolutely. And because of limited income and the likelihood of, or the increased likelihood of being in poverty, single parents are less likely to have options available to them, such as private healthcare to turn to.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, I'm an American, so I'm used to that. I'm used to having very limited medical options, and unfortunately, we come up with ulterior approaches unless it's absolutely necessary, unless we absolutely need medicine, unless he absolutely needs to see a doctor, and that's not only that. The other layer is, can I afford a day off? No one else is going to take my child. And now we're in this environment, so it's just maximized. I work independently because I work for the university, and I work online as a lecturer. So I have more. I'm like a lot of mothers who get to this point. We manage our lives and our jobs to be able to be present for our children. But early on, I didn't have those options, and now because of the constraints that the medical system is under, like that is something that's been heightened lately. Like, no, we can't do that. That's not an option right now. Please put on a mask. Please put on gloves. And, please take precautions, because I don't know if we can manage this if you get sick. Because if you get sick, I'm absolutely getting sick, because I'm the one who's taking care of you. And I'm the one working for it. So there's no one besides me. So I cannot get sick. Like, this is not an option. So I think that the severity of that for lone parents is that this is an option. Like the whole ship goes down if we go down. And that scares the hell out of me. So when he cut something, I'm like, please clean it up. Please put gloves on. We'll wash it when you come home. I ordered masks, which were outrageously expensive, and I got a couple. And I'm like, no, I don't know how this is going to last. So I have to pay that price. That's fine. But that is absolutely a stress in the back of my mind, and it gives me anxiety. And I'm sure it's giving any parent anxiety, but especially lone parents. There's no one else. Even if we're financially stable, there's no one else. We can't pay someone to come take care of our sick kid. No one's going to say yes to that, and no one's going to pay the bill. It's just so much more overwhelming. Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah, the stress and the mental load that single parents experience is so much higher than in couples when it comes to all of these worries that you've listed. And also, Amy, you used the word scared. I'm interested in the everyday management and experiences of that fear.
Well, I grew up in poverty especially when I had my son. So to me, it's the chaos factor. Like, what can I manage? What can I not manage? And how do I create normalcy with chaos, with living in chaos type of thing? So I find myself, I think, doing what a lot of people do when they have limited resources, is what consistencies can I maintain? I can make sure we have food, and I can make, so we go get food every 3 days or 4 days. I can make sure that right now we have internet access and we watch movies. So I think maintaining normalcy is the only approach I have to managing the chaos outside and making sure it doesn't, as much as possible, infiltrate what's happening internally within us. And yeah, I have my scared moments, and yeah, I have my issues. My focus is to make sure that I don't project that onto him, or that I express them to him in a way that he can help engage in some positive, so he knows, so he doesn't feel like he's not a part of our family, because I'm usually really open with Ethan. So my goal is like, well, this is why for instance, I gave him a sociology course, which he's not happy about. But my goal is, I could have a sociology lecture, what do you expect? But I did this because I'm like, you have like 3 more hours of class. You're all of a sudden you're not doing. So yeah, you're going to watch my lectures, and we're going to talk about this. And you're going to do this because you need to have 6 hours of schoolwork, and you need to do this. And especially he has a lecture on deviance coming up and anime. So I want to be able to explain to him what's happening around him. And so that he had an understanding that whatever mom's doing, whatever's happening inside and outside can be understood, even in the chaos. There is some language for that. So I find myself looking to the resources I have and trying to maintain some form of normalcy in the home, because I am scared. And if anything, that's driving my need to maintain that. I hope that answered the question.
Absolutely. Before we move on to our next question, I'd like to ask you both really quickly, how do you cope with the everyday fear that you experience?
Well, personally, the way I cope with it is I meditate every day. And also I have a gratitude journal. So I write every day when I first wake up, I do meditation, and I write in my journal, the top 3 things I'm grateful for. And then I write down my affirmations for the day. And then I write down my goals. So this, I don't know if you've heard about it, but there's a book called The Miracle Morning. So it's based on that book. So it's about how you start your day. Basically gives your day some structure and some positive outlook for the rest of your day. And then obviously when you write down your goals and you write down what you're grateful for, it starts you off in this positive start. Some people do it before they sleep. I do when I first wake up. And actually I wake up at 6 a.m, and I'm part of this 6 o'clock miracle group. So we all, we join like a Zoom call, and we do the goal writing together, and then we watch a motivational video. It's like a 3-4 minute video. So for me, this is how I cope. This is what helps me get through my daily fears and my daily challenges. I have something to look forward to every day, and obviously whenever I write my goals, I do my daily goals, my quarterly goals, my yearly goals, and my 10-year goals. So, so it just keeps me focused, because I know whatever I do that day will bring me closer to these goals, whether it's the daily or the quarterly or the yearly. So everything, every step I take should be towards these goals.
Yes. So I guess similar in I think like my framing is similar. Yeah, so I think what we have in common is this notion that I need to look ahead, because whatever's happening now, I need to tell myself it's temporary. Otherwise, I'll get overwhelmed by it. So I have to have something. I have to have some objective. I have to have something forward in the future that gives me something to grasp, so that I'm not overwhelmed by the impending everything. So I know that's a psychology I've maintained through most of my life, particularly when I had my son. But as far as kind of like what I do on an everyday basis, it's just kind of been a little bit more of the same thing. So I get up and I talk to my friends in the States, and I talk to my friends wherever they are in the world. So, I have like 3 or 4 people I talk to, and I kind of assess what's going on, and we're reconnecting, and we're worrying about each other, and we're more or less maintaining our community. So I absolutely speak to several people for about an hour or 2. I exercise. That's I guess my form of meditation. I'm mad. I'm irritated. I'm frustrated. I can't control a lot of things, but I can control my body. I can control getting mad at this damn video. This guy, I'm sure he's on cocaine because he's too freaking happy. Do you ever watch his workout videos? Like, and then kind of like what you mentioned. Like then I take a shower and I outline, okay, what do I need to do today? What objectively can I hit? And what if I'm too overwhelmed? I'll do admin because I can't think right now. I can do TikTok stuff. If I am in a good mental space, then I can sit with something that requires more of my mental attention and more of my emotional investment. And then, it's about managing the chaos, more or less. I hate to continue saying that. And it, again, kind of the same thing, like, how do I start my day? How do I fill my day? How do I make sure my son's days now I have to do the same thing for my son throughout the entire day, because now I'm managing that. And thankfully he's 15, so we can manage that together. So it's not like pulling along a 2-year-old. I don't know what I'd do if I have a 2-year-old. God bless anyone who's doing that right now. And then I end the day with winding down. So I still have similar framing. Again, normalcy, similar framing. I'm starting my day. This is what the bulk of the day looks like. These are the points I'm hitting. And at the end of the day, winding down with my son, watching a movie, reconnecting, and getting lost in Facebook, something for an hour that tells me and triggers me, that tells me, okay, we're done with today and we made it through the day, type of thing.
Wow, the resourcefulness and the resilience of certain groups of people, including poor people and single parent families, every day, but particularly at times like these, it really blows me away. So thank you so much for sharing that. And I think something we have to remember as well is that we all are human, and we will have times when we feel completely overwhelmed, or even have, for example, suicidal feelings, or feeling very low, very depressed, very hopeless. And these are all very normal feelings when experiencing extremely high levels of stress that other groups of people can't empathize with. So moving on to our last couple of questions. So do you agree with the statement that the virus has allowed people to see the workloads that mums and single mums undertake all the time? So running the home on top of other forms of work, community work on top of parenting, keeping the household going at the same time as looking after the children, navigating feelings of isolation. And also, I would like to bring up the experiences of navigating a highly inaccessible benefit system where you're always worried about where your next paycheck or your next income stream is going to come from. There's a constant ongoing worry. Do you think that people will learn and see these workloads from this pandemic?
It's difficult for me to answer that question because personally, I don't feel that the virus per se changed my outlook, because I'm still working from home. I'm still a single mom. Like we said before, that our responsibilities have multiplied because we are having to manage our children's schedules on top of our own. So we have to, it's like we're working double time. However, what I believe may be happening is that for families where both parents are living together, then maybe the fathers would appreciate more what the mothers are doing, because they are they're in lockdown with the whole family 24 hours a day. So maybe they see what the mothers are doing, which maybe they took for granted, or maybe they were not appreciated of or aware of, because it's happening in front of their eyes, and maybe they're actually helping, taking some of the load off from their wives or from their partners. This is what I think may be happening, but obviously I can't speak because I can't speak personally on that, because that doesn't apply to me. But I think in terms of isolation, I think maybe this will also, the effect on isolation on people who are not single parents. Maybe again they appreciate what single parents may go through on a daily and regular basis, because when as single parents, a big part of your life is really living in isolation because of the way life life is, because you're not, your time is not your own. You have to always navigate your schedule to accommodate your children's needs and your children's schedules and their time. So this is what I see as possible effects of the coronavirus on people who are not in either separated families or divorced families. I think for single parents, it doesn't really make a difference, because that's how we live our life anyway.
Yeah, I agree with that statement. I mean, the question asks if people are seeing it. If you happen to live with a mother who, whether or not you're engaging or related to her, like, then you'll see all the work she's doing, because now she's pulled all that into the home. But I agree with the statement that, we already are on our own. So unless someone else is living with us, you don't actually see all the things we're doing. And that's, I think, a significant reason why we don't get a lot of why we don't have a lot of services available to us, because no one sees our problems, and we're more or less blamed for them, right? There's that kind of that catch-22 that comes with being a single parent, that somehow it's our fault, completely our fault. And what I find amazing about that is over half of single mothers were married. Almost all of them were with their parents when they had their children. They were almost all coupled. So I'm always kind of like really amazed by that. But it essentially, you're right, it doesn't really, no one's going to see what we do. But as far as the connection of our self-isolation and having to become insulated, all of a sudden, that's the reality of single parents. Like, welcome to single parenthood. If you just
welcome to a world.
True. Welcome to a world where you don't have a community. Welcome to a world where you don't have access to people. Welcome to a world in which intimacy deficiency is going to rise unless you have your partner with you, and even that's going to cause trouble. Like, welcome to a world where you have to make do and you have to come up with other solutions, and the world won't bend for you. Welcome to that world. Like, that's just the reality of it. And another, what I think we as single mothers aren't doing are really vocalizing those details, because one, we're taught to stifle ourselves, and two, we don't have the luxury of time to express these issues because we're too busy contending with them. So what I see is what the virus is more or less doing is you're welcome to a world where there's no community, and that there are no other avenues. Welcome to the world in which the state doesn't care and the systems don't work for you. That's the world we already live in, and we must manage it, and we must find a way through it. And there is no give and take, and your problems are your problems, and everyone's family focuses on their own. So it's unfortunate. I don't want to believe that, particularly as a sociologist who understands how important community is, who understands how, just like what she's doing, she knows her child is involved in all these extracurricular activities to ensure she develops a sense of self outside the family, and to ensure she's developing a sense of community. Like, these are really important. We know how important it is because we don't have them. So therefore we encourage our children to have them, and we absolutely want them to participate in those things. But like, we're just used to not having them for ourselves because there's no time, energy, and money, and there's no one else in the room with us. So for everyone else that's kind of going through the virus and sitting in this and feeling lost and overwhelmed and confused, like, that's not going to go away. And what advice I would offer is, even though this is a training for single parenthood, is that try to do what we do. And it's not going to be easy, and you're going to fail at everything. What matters is that you tick certain boxes throughout the day. And what matters is that you somehow manage it and find some normalcy, and you have to manage the chaos. You have to, whatever little victory you do to that day, that's a victory. And that's what you need to hold on to. And if, your kids are fine, if you've kind of gone through the day and you hit some box, that's fine. And the next day, try to do another one. And that's what we do. We just kind of go in and day out. So for everyone that's engaging with us, I'm sorry, and I get it. I'm there with you. But I think the only thing that we have working for us is that we're already there. We always were. And that everyone else is now in their own rooms with us in this very, very weird way. So that's the advice I have.
I think that would be such a good new name for the podcast. Welcome to our world. I love that, Amy. Such a powerful line.
Here I am, like, welcome to Disneyland, y'all. Like, get ready to be thrown. Get ready for no one to care. Get ready to throw up and just wipe it off and keep on walking. Get ready for every other one of these roller coasters, because it's this. You're gonna get stuck on something, and
And I think the difference is, for us, once this is over, we'll still be going through the same, isolation. So that's the difference. For us, it's a lifestyle, but for others, it's just a temporary blip in their life.
Thank you both for such powerful answers. So, Amy, I think it was so helpful to have the topics of stigma and the myths surrounding single parenthood and some of the stereotypes that exist about single parents. So as you say, most children in single parent families are actually born inside of marriage, and the average age of a single parent, I think, is in their mid-30s. Whereas that's completely contrary to the stereotype that, most single parents are teenagers, not that there's anything wrong with that, and that most have their children outside of couples and marriages. So thank you for bringing up those very important angles. And Zeba, I really enjoyed the imaginative element to your answer. So what would the world look like if fathers self-actualized around the work that their female counterparts and the mothers within their family actually undertake on a daily basis? I mean, how would that change the gender order? Wow, really powerful image there.
Encourage men to participate in paternity leave. And we have evidence, once men are in the home changes, because that's where power is, unfortunately. So we want that shift, we can have it. We encourage men to participate in the home when they have children. And then they realize, oh crap, like I got to take care of the baby all the time. Oh my God, no one's going to take this baby from me. Oh my God, like I got to feed. Oh, there's no time for me. Yeah. And as moms and women, we're just like, yeah, playa, welcome to the club. Like, good luck. Like, yeah, I think that's the only time it shifts, is when men participate and men see it, because then it becomes their problem. That's the division. It's their problem at that point. Before that, it's not their problem. It's women's problems. And they'll bat an eye at it, or they'll, throw women a bone. But that's what we get upset about. We don't want your bone. We want you participating. And it is your problem. These are your children too. This is your family too. This is your community too. So I think we do have an example of what that solution looks like, and it's feasible. But men aren't being expected to participate, and men aren't, and men don't have to be frank.
I think you really hit something on the head there. So the reason why we've seen this radical socialist economic program that the government have rolled out, and it is radical for the Conservative government to be paying 80% of wages and freezing mortgages and making benefits more widely accessible, etc., is because men have got sick, and able-bodied people have got sick, and rich people have got sick. And that's what it's taken for a more equal and accessible economic system. So absolutely, I think the power that men have to change the gender order and change the way that homes run and change politics and economics, because as you say, Amy, they're the ones that hold the majority of political and social and economic power. So if they were able to self-actualize, I'm just so interested to imagine what that world would look like. So moving on to our last question, what would you like to see change in terms of the government's approaches to COVID-19? So would you like to see a more long-term accessible benefit system outside of the parameters of the pandemic? What is it that you would like to see?
I have a two-part answer. And the first one is not focusing necessarily on single parents. It's focusing generally on the state's response. As a deviance researcher, that's what I'm looking at. And not only as a family member, but as a deviance researcher, I'm looking at this, realizing, okay, you guys, the state needs to maintain the chaos before it happens. So making sure that people aren't going to be kicked out on the streets, for instance, freezing mortgages, making sure, of course, there's food in most grocery stores. That's great. But reassuring the country that, okay, these measures will be put in place. We can still survive. There's still going to be food. You guys can still live in your homes. There's still going to be security. Here are some guidelines. Here are some rules. Go out at these times, whatever. They're doing some of that. But as a deviance researcher, I'm seeing this and I'm like, you need to be honest and you need to tell people this is going to last for several months, because preventative measures haven't been taken, and making a comparison between us and Wuhan is just ridiculously unethical. It's irresponsible. You can't do that. That's a different case. They were on top of that the moment they got a case. The moment something happened, and they're coming back from that weeks later because they've been maintaining preventative measures and dealing with the problem. And no one's doing that in the West. Everyone's pushing it off. And as a deviance researcher, knowing that chaos is an enemy, we call it enemy, chaos will start to rise if we don't manage this. So from a state's perspective, I'm seeing the failure of the state, and not just because the system is already failing, as capitalism, for instance, but I'm more or less concerned, like, people need basic needs met. They need to know that they can still feed their children. They need to know medical services will be available. You need to deal with this immediately. So I'm concerned from that perspective. How is chaos going to be maintained by the state and in communities, and to make sure those things are okay? Because if these things are not met, that's when we start seeing those things rise. We start seeing crime start being committed exponentially because people don't have basic needs met. So that's where my focus is at, is where's the information from social scientists saying you need to do this because there is something around the bend if we don't take care of basic needs. So And then as a parent, is what I hope for after this is that we start realizing that the system is ultimately failing most people, not just poor people, most people. That here we can't have medical services, and we're telling people they can go back to work in a few weeks, and we're more or less telling workers we don't fundamentally care about their concerns, which is something social scientists have already kind of argued. What I hope for is kind of 4-day work weeks. We obviously realize we can work from home to some extent with some jobs. Daycare should be covered. Here we are producing the next working citizen. It should be covered by the state. The state's going to reap the rewards of that labor. Making sure we have family time, paid leave, paid sick leave, basic necessities as an advanced democratic society. That's what I think should be applied, not just to single parents, but for most parents, so that they can have community, so they can have healthy interactions, and that what they're investing into the state gives back. That was my very long-winded answer. There you go.
First of all, from a career perspective, I feel that there's still. Sorry, just 1 second. Hello?
This is a perfect example.
Yes.
Poppy, we could only put something down for so long.
Yes, I was saying, in terms of the career perspective, we're still a long way behind when it comes to women's salaries. So, for instance, especially in equality of pay, if you look at the law firms, the number of women partners in law firms is minuscule. I think it's 2%, which is ridiculous. Yeah. Also, when you look at women in CEO positions and women entrepreneurs, again, the numbers are so minute, which I think the government can definitely help correct this inequality. For instance, by providing more grants and more financial assistance for women to move up the ladder, number one, by training, by giving them, different tools and assistance to work their way up the career ladder, but also to ensure that women get paid the same as men. I mean, a lot of times women actually do the same job as men, but because of their sex, they get paid, maybe 30% or 40% less than their male counterpart, which is really, really unfair, especially in this day and age, 2020 right now. And this is still happening, even though we have all these, equality acts in force. But, when it comes to reality, it's not really being applied. So that's number one, how the government can help. Number two is, when it comes, I think Amy touched upon that when it comes to single parents, a lot of times they need to decide between taking a part-time job or benefits. This is in the Gingerbread group. I know a lot of parents, single parents, who decided to stay home so that they don't miss out on their benefits, which is very sad, because they want to contribute to society. They want to earn money. They want to use your skills in the labor force, but they know that if they start working part-time, which they have to because they cannot work full-time because of their childcare needs, and they cannot afford to pay babysitting and childcare services, and they're stuck with staying at home and claiming benefits, which makes sense. Why doesn't the government actually encourage single parents to work part-time so that they can be an asset to society, earn money, and at the same time still earn benefits? They can earn less benefits, but not to be totally without any benefits, because then they cannot survive. So it's the government can definitely help strike a balance to encourage people to go back to the workforce instead of just claiming benefits when that's the only solution available to them.
That's such an important point. So how the government could change working structures to make it more compatible with the lives of single parents and their caring responsibilities. So the research that Gingerbread carried out found, so their policy work found that most single parents are actually in work, and those that aren't in work want to be in work, but they can't be because the structures of work are just not compatible with their caring responsibilities. So, for example, they may have children of multiple ages, school runs, etc. They may have more than one or two children that they're looking after completely on their own. I met women who were looking after 5 children on their own sometimes. And in addition to that, work often doesn't pay. So the amount that childcare costs, so if you were to send 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 children all to childcare whilst you're at work, then you may not come home with a lot of money at the end of the month.
If at all, you may be working just to pay the babysitting bills, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, I did that. I mean, both of those stories are true for me and my background. I mean, I had the choice, and I worked. I obviously worked when I had him, and I learned really quickly, like, I can get more in welfare than I could working full time as a waitress. And I'm like, well, wait, what does that mean? You're more or less telling me to stay at home on welfare, and I want to work. Well, what you do is what you do. And I'm like, well, I want to be around my kid, but what? So I absolutely, the first year my son was born, I was like, I just took welfare. And I'm like, there's no point, because you're teaching me that you're going to take away any of the welfare money I get if I work. So you're teaching me not to work. So I did that for a year. I absolutely did it for a year. And I went to school for a year. That's what I did. I was like, I'm going to stay in welfare the rest of my life unless I figure this out. But that was an initiative that I took. And obviously the jobs, like when I started working full time, all my money was going to daycare. And even I was like, what am I doing? Everyone else is raising my kid. I'm working my ass off just to make sure my son has daycare and I don't see him. Like, everyone else is taking care of him, and I'm missing out on my child. Everyone else gets to be around my child. And those are the options. And so, I mean, during the last few years, I've been around my son on an everyday basis. And it's because I'm working on my PhD, and because I've been teaching for 10 years, and because I have a career, that's why I'm in the middle class. So I have the luxuries that come with economic stability. But when you don't have those luxuries, you don't get the option to really see your child and have a career. Those are economic privileges that you get. So, and here we tell women, all you got to do is work, and say, well, who's going to take care of my kid? And then, well, you're to blame for having that kid. I'm like, well, it takes 2 to tango, player. Like, I don't know about that. Yet to all the rational responses are lost, because it's, well, you figure it out, and then you realize relatively quickly the systems fail you. All of them fail you, no matter what. All the resources aren't available, and whatever's there is not really designed to benefit you or to sustain yourself on. And you find a way around it. So you start doing like illicit things. You start bartering with your friends. You start selling things on the side. You start doing things to make sure you can make ends meet. And when you do a career, like, I know I like.
Oh, lots of single parents go into, for example, sex work because of the the payments that you can receive per hour are so much higher than other forms of work, and also the flexibility.
Because you could be around your kid and you have the most bang for your buck. And either way you lose, no matter what you're doing, you're losing. You're just choosing between which one is the poor option, or that's it. That which one is the best of the poor options. That's it. You're always losing. That's the perpetual reality of single parents. That you're always you don't get anything really, and you're just trying to make the best out of a situation in which you're doing the right thing. You're raising your kid. You want to be there. You want to be this mother, and yet you're a bad mother. Like no matter what you do, it's fundamentally you're wrong. And you come up with ulterior approaches because the avenues that are traditional aren't working because they're not designed for you. You learn that really quickly. Like you're not supposed to be successful following these because you haven't followed them correctly, even though you may have gotten married, even though you were in a partnership, even though you had a child with someone and you quote did things right. And then you realize like if you're not part of an economic stable unit, that all of a sudden things go wrong really, really fast. And you just have to kind of burden that, and you do things you wouldn't normally do. You do things that are deviant, you do things that are criminal, you do things because at the end of the day, you learn the systems aren't going to take care of you, so you have to take care of yourself. And if that means making sure you do A, B, and C to make sure your kid's fed, then whatever, fuck it, A, B, and C, my kid's fed, because that's the options we have left. People make desperate choices when traditional options are no longer available. That's why they make those choices. I always find it interesting when people kind of demonize these groups. And as a deviance researcher, I know that they've been put out there. They've been systematically pushed out. So they're not there by choice. They're there because they've been denied. So what they're doing is making ulterior approaches because traditional avenues have been denied to them or limited. So when you make these comments about, oh, well, just get a job. And I'm like, that assumes all other things are maintained. That assumes like everything else will be taken care of. And you have to be in a financial position in order to have those access points. So yeah, like I just went on my tangent, but yeah, like I'm always just like, no, we do things that are deviant because we have to. We've been pushed into a deviant corner. And we have basic needs like everyone else. So we'll meet them if we need to. That's why we're creative. That's why we manage it. And usually unsuccessfully, but yet our kids are fed, our kids are clothed, the bills are being paid somehow. Even if we have to move in with other people, we'll move in with other people. I don't have privacy. Oh, well, too bad. Okay, then we'll do that too. So the privileges that come with economic stability are things that we don't have either. So we're just like, oh, okay. So this whole coronavirus shift isn't a shift for people who are used to not having anything or not used to having consistent anything. So yeah, like it's just, yeah, I went on my tangent, girl. I'm sorry.
No, I think that really encapsulated the misogyny and the economic injustice that runs through the experiences of many single parents.
Personally speaking, I was in a very fortunate position that my parents actually looked after my first daughter. I first got divorced, so we actually lived with them in the same house for a few years, and because of that, I was able to go to law school. Their support and their help. I'm sure that there's that doesn't happen to most other single moms, but obviously the parents the parents and grandparents support is also another huge factor to think about, because if the government can give those grandparents some kind of support, then also help single parents to progress and whether to go back to school or requalify as a different profession, then that will also help them reinvent themselves and earn a living and start a career. So that's another angle I was thinking about.
Right, absolutely. And it's an unseen labor force that again, that's, it's absolutely unseen. It's really common, especially in the US for ethnic minority communities. For us, like I'm Latina, like we do that as well. Like grandma and grandpa comes in, but at the same time, like they have their lives. So it's like, well, I'm not sacrificing my entire life. How are you going to manage this with me? And like, so we have those communities as well. And yet that's not really part of the nuclear model that we have in the West, because the nuclear model more or less maintains that grandma and grandpa are outside the home. Yeah. And, and that's not realistic in an environment where people have to rely on each other. And if we want workers to become more skilled and we want mothers to become stable, we need community in family. And those are the things a lot of us don't have a lot of the times. And I was on welfare, and I went and I pursued my education, but I had friends helping me, and I would barter childcare with them, and I would watch their child and they would watch my child while we went to school. So, but these are like ulterior approaches. They're not economic, they're bartering systems, but they're ulterior approaches to managing how to get ahead, because the systems in place aren't actually working based on their traditional approaches. So you have to be creative. You have to ask other people to help you. And you're lucky if you have it. And if you do, it's usually for a limited time, because no one else wants to raise your kid fundamentally as much as they love your children.
Yeah. My parents are still helping me until now.
So well, that's great.
I'm very blessed. I'm very blessed.
But that's a support system. But that's something that a lot of us are missing. That is that support system. And what's not spoken about is the lack of community that we kind of deal with. And when parents do participate, grandparents do participate, it's an unseen labor force. And that's another kind of issue that we're kind of missing in the coronavirus thing, is that, well, these are people who participate in our children's lives sometimes.
Exactly.
And these are, and that's another layer that they need to engage, because they hold cultural values, and they really hold cultural values and family values within the system that we're not acknowledging. And we're just expected to do them for free. Like, what are you talking about? Like, they're all multi-layered.
Well, thank you both of you for those additions. Just to finish up, I just want to ask you one last quick question, and then we will close. We'll finish there. Do you think the coronavirus is sexist?
I think, first of all, it was ageist. That's obvious, because it was like, oh, old people, whatever, they're old, they live their life, that weird kind of response. That it was obviously ageist, and it's obviously based on a capitalistic notion, right? Like, oh, well, they're old, they're not contributing to any production in society, so who cares? They're a strain on the system. So that's a very capitalistic, classist notion. As far as sexist, I think the invisible work it can now be seen by anyone watching women do that work. I think it can highlight the sexism that exists within the home.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's sexist per se, because it can attack both men and women. But like Amy said, that maybe it's sexist in a way that it shows the light on what moms do in the background and in silence. So I can see that as a possible sexist angle. Also, I wanted to point out that in Italy, a lot of the doctors are actually facing this question whether or not old people have the right to survive over young people, because when they're so strained with their resources, they actually had to take this very difficult decision between saving an old person's life versus saving a young person's life. And most times they chose the young person because he or she has more to contribute to society. So I hope we won't be facing this in England, but this is a possible repercussion from this virus, which is very, very worrying.
Yeah, and that's a sentiment I've been hearing in the States as well, like anticipating what's going to happen and the types of emergency calls that medical personnel will have to make between who to save and quote who not to save. And a lot of that is based on framing of what we consider helping, who we consider it should be saved, which is really based on productivity. So yeah, I mean, I've been hearing that sentiment as well. And my sister's a nurse; she's an ICU nurse, so I know that's a concern in the community. And also, I came across someone from BA as I was traveling from London a couple of weeks ago, and she was like, "Yeah, there's dealing with people in the medical field." She's like, "There's seven strains of the virus. We've only identified 4. We don't know what the other 3 are. That's what scares us." And how we're not really quite sure how these mutates as we move forward. No one's being honest. No one's telling us anything. We're just saying, oh, this is temporary. And as a deviance researcher, I see that. And I think you can't tell people this is temporary. You have to tell them how you're going to manage the moment so that they can, say that in their home so that they can bring that into their home, and they can have some potential end date in mind. But this is like in the middle of watching a separation, right? That's how I feel, like the anxiety of it, children watching this, and how are we going to respond? How is not going to respond? Is he going to keep his job? Is he not going to keep his job? Is she going to keep her job? That causes so much more stress than I think knowing what the actual issues are and knowing how to approach them. Because as a family member, as a mother, I know that that's my concern, is like, what am I working with? What am I not working with, so I can manage that? But if I don't know what's happening, then I don't know how to manage my family. So I think that's what's missing, is the conversation of what's realistic, what's not realistic, and what can we expect this for the long haul. And I personally think we're going to do this for the long haul. Just I don't see any other measures in place that tell me that it's not going to be for the long haul. So I'm doing that as a precautionary measure. I know a lot of other mothers and single mothers are thinking along those lines, like, how do I make sure that we're okay for the long haul, and what does that look like? I went on my tangent again. I'm sorry, girl.
No, not at all. Women apologize way too much.
Yes, I know. I know
mothers.
Better than to do that.
Yeah, but it's just a finding in itself, So maybe a better question, I should have phrased it as, how are the responses to the coronavirus sexist? But I wanted to try the former question to see what your answers would be. So I'm interested in how the entire government's response, well, not just this government, but governments all around the world, is entirely predicated on women just picking up the pieces. Everybody, the population of the world going back into the home, and that's entirely predicated on no conversation with women, no conversation with mothers, just get on with it, pick up the pieces. So I think that, to go back to my earlier question about our mothers at the forefront, I think it's safe to say that our answer to that is yes. So we're going to finish up there. Thank you so much to all of our listeners for tuning into this super interesting and engaging conversation with our special guests, Amy Andrada and Zemar Dajani. Thank you so much for joining us, Amy and Zemar.
Thank you.
Until next time, thank you for tuning in.